What is up, Detroit Lions fans? Now, the title of this video may be having some of you go like, what? What kind of question is that? And yeah, this is a bit of a question out of left field. I won't deny that. But I found some next-gen stats that make me a little bit concerned. And that's why I decided to ask the question, do the Lions have a problem at wide receiver? So what would make me ask this kind of a question? The Lions' top two receivers this season, being Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones, were bottom 6 in the NFL in terms of separation. Kenny Golladay was actually dead last in the NFL in separation yardage. And Marvin Jones was actually getting pretty decent cushions on average, as he had a top 15 cushion in the NFL. Golladay was not getting that much of a cushion, as he had a bottom 35 cushion in the NFL. For comparison, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both had more yards of separation on average than Golladay and Jones did. Lockett actually averaged 3.2 yards of separation, which was top 31 in the NFL. Metcalf didn't have the most yards of separation, but it's still more than what Jones and Golladay were creating. So how often were these four receivers held in check? What I decided to do is go and find what these receivers' average yards per game was and find out how often they exceeded it and did not meet that average. And also, I wanted to find out how often these receivers were held to less than 63 yards per game, or just held to less than 63 yards, because you need 62.5 yards per game to get 1,000 yards for a season. Then I also wanted to find how often these receivers were held to less than 50 yards. So when we look at Golladay averaged 74.4 receiving yards per game, and he was held below that 11 times out of 16 games. So that means when he went off, but when he was shut down, he was kind of shut down. Golladay was held to below 63 yards on 8 separate occasions in the 2018 season in 16 games. And he was only held below 50 yards 5 times. So that's certainly good, I guess. Marvin Jones averaged 59.9 yards per game this season, and he was held below that average 8 times in 13 games. He was held below 63 yards 8 times, and he was held below 50 yards 7 times. Now, it's not, being held below your average isn't overly concerning, at least for now, because Tyler Lockett was kind of like Kenny Golladay in the sense that when he went off, but there were certainly games where he wasn't really that much of a factor. Lockett averaged 66.1 yards per game. He was held below that 10 times. And he was held below 63 yards 10 times as well. And he was held below 50 yards 6 times. Now, when we look at DK Metcalf, he actually surprisingly appears to have been the most consistent receiver of this group. Metcalf did only average 56.3 yards per game, but he was only held below that average 7 times. And he was only held below 63 yards 8 times. And he was held below 50 yards only 6 times. So, with Golladay and Jones in particular, they could have great games, but there were certainly games where they weren't that much of a factor, really. So, was this a Matthew Stafford problem? The reason why Golladay and Jones were inconsistent? I mean, honestly, not really. And I'm going to explain why. Stafford played in 8 games in 2019, of course. He averaged 312.4 yards per game, and he exceeded his average 4 times, and he threw for less than his average 4 times. So, let's start off with Kenny Golladay. In 2 out of the 4 games where Stafford was held below his season average in yards, Golladay still exceeded his yards per game average. And 2 of the 4 games where Stafford was held below his season average, Golladay had less receiving yards than his season average. So, with Golladay, not really much of a correlation there. And in 2 of the 4 games where Stafford threw for above his season average, Golladay exceeded his season average. But at the same time, in 2 of the 4 games where Stafford threw for above his season average, Golladay had less receiving yards than his season average. And it's literally the exact same thing with Marvin Jones. In 2 out of the 4 games where Stafford was held below his season average in yards per game, Jones exceeded his average in yards. In particular, the Philadelphia game, Stafford only threw for like 200 yards and Jones still exceeded his season average. And also in 2 of the 4 games where Stafford was held below his season average, Jones had less receiving yards. In 2 of the 4 games where Stafford threw for above his season average, Jones exceeded his average in yards per game. But in 2 of the 4 games where Stafford threw for above his season average, Jones had less receiving yards than his average for the season. So is it a Stafford problem? In all honesty, not really. At least I don't think it was. So, do the Lions have a problem at wide receiver? I just spent all that time talking about it, but my conclusion is I don't know. I just thought that was certainly interesting that our 2 top targets were near the bottom in terms of creating separation. Now, one flaw with the stat is that, at least based on my understanding, the separation is calculated based on targets. So we don't know how much separation they were creating when they weren't targeted. But someone let me know if I'm wrong. So yeah, what do you guys think? Do the Lions have a problem at wide receiver? Or do you think we'll be just fine where we're at? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.